Welcome back, friends. You are listening to the Juicebox Podcast.
My name is Polly, and I live in Northern Nevada. I'm excited to talk to you.
Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. I know this is going to sound crazy, but Blue Circle Health is a nonprofit that's offering a totally free virtual type 1 diabetes clinical care, education, and support program for adults 18 and up. You heard me right. Free. No strings attached. Just free. Currently, if you live in Florida, Maine, Vermont, Ohio, Delaware, Alabama, or Missouri, you're eligible for Blue Circle Health right now, but they are adding states quickly in 2025. So make sure to follow them at Blue Circle Health on social media and make yourself familiar with bluecirclehealth.org. Blue Circle Health is free. It is without cost. There are no strings attached. I am not hiding anything from you. bluecirclehealth.org. You know why they had to buy an ad? No one believes it's free. The Diabetes Variables series from the Juicebox Podcast goes over all the little things that affect your diabetes that you might not think about. From travel and exercise to hydration and even trampolines. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Go up in the menu and click on Diabetes Variables. Today's podcast is sponsored by the insulin pump that my daughter has been wearing since she was 4 years old. Omnipod. Omnipod.com/juicebox. You too can have the same insulin pump that my daughter has been wearing every day for 16 years. The episode you're about to enjoy was brought to you by Dexcom. The Dexcom G7, the same CGM that my daughter wears. You can learn more and get started today at my link, dexcom.com/juicebox.
My name is Polly, and I live in Northern Nevada. I'm excited to talk to you.
Excellent, Polly. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So you have the diabetes, as they say?
I do. Got a touch of it.
Just a splash.
A big splash.
When did it splash on you?
Well, I've got a very long, embarrassing, I guess, path. So about 12 years ago,
Okay.
my husband said, "You haven't been to the doctor in a very long time. I think it's time." So I really probably dislike and distrust doctors. And so I was friendly with a very capable midwife. So I went to see her. She said, "What's your A1C?" And I was like, "What the heck are you talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, "You've never had your A1C done?" And I said, "No." She goes, "Well, let's do it."
How old are you at that point, 12 years ago?
Probably about 39.
Okay.
And so she did it, and she did a bunch of other stuff. And so she goes, "Oh, it was really cold that day." And she said, "This A1C needs to be a little bit warm." So she's like, "Let me go put it in the bathroom and I'll be right back." So she came back about 5 minutes later, and she was white. And she was like,
I peed on your test. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
We have to do it again.
Yeah.
By the way, when does it get cold in Nevada? I don't understand.
I'm in Northern Nevada.
Oh, I see.
In the mountains.
I see. Go ahead.
Yeah. She was white. She goes, "You've got a problem." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "This is 12.6.
Oh.
I said, "What are you talking about?" I knew absolutely nothing.
Right.
And so she said, "This is indicative of diabetes." I've always been overweight to some degree. At that particular point, I was losing weight. And, we all know why now. And she said, "You need to go to the ER right now and get this checked out and then get to an endocrinologist."
Huh.
And so I said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And I had just read we were following a diet called the McDougall diet at that time.
Okay.
And it's a low-fat vegan diet. And I was really getting serious about it, which is why I thought I was losing weight. And Dr. McDougall had just posted on his newsletter about this diet called the rice diet, which was used originally formed for high blood pressure, but people had really good success 40, 50 years ago with diabetes. It's really a miracle, and it's not used anymore because it is tough. It is a tough diet, and now we have medication that they didn't have back then. So I said, I'm going to try the rice diet. She was like, she's like, I'll give you 90 days, and then I'm not going to treat you anymore. She's like, you've got to do something.
Polly, let me stop you for a second. I want to live in this moment for a second. At 12A1C, are you thinking now in hindsight she thought you had type 2 diabetes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Because at a 12A1C, I'm going to go eat rice is like, well, then you're going to come back with a 15A1C. Like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was like, well, you've gone this far. Basically, let's do it your way, and then we'll do it my way. So I went to do this, and it's not just rice. It's rice and fruit. That's all you eat.
Mm-hmm.
Very little. I think I was at like 900 calories a day. She had a scheduling conflict, so we had to go 4 months. So I went 4 months on this diet. So I went to see her after 4 months, and my A1C was 6.2.
Okay. And had you lost weight?
Surprisingly, when you're sick and on the rice diet, you don't always lose weight, is what I found out eventually. So I lost 18 pounds, which with such little calories was surprising to me. I was expecting the weight to just fall off. That was my introduction to diabetes. And I thought, hey, I've cracked the code. I'm
you
good.
Went from this 12 to the 6.
Yeah.
Not thinking that you probably had LADA and you had like ebbing and flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. I see.
I did the modified version of the rice diet. I had never felt better in my life. I'm a pretty big advocate of this diet because so many people, I've studied it, and so many people do really well, but it's tough. Just eating rice and fruit. So food became non-fuel at that point.
Yeah. Hey, give me a second here. Key components of the rice diet. White rice is a staple. Fruits and vegetables. The diet includes fresh fruits and vegetables, which provide essential vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Low sodium, minimal animal products, low fat, low protein, whole unprocessed foods. That sounds like the diet?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. And it runs in phases. Is that right? There's like a detox phase. And the Dexcom G7 is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and it features a lightning fast 30-minute warm-up time. That's right. From the time you put on the Dexcom G7 till the time you're getting readings, 30 minutes. That's pretty great. It also has a 12-hour grace period, so you can swap your sensor when it's convenient for you. All of that on top of it being small, accurate, incredibly wearable, and light. These things, in my opinion, make the Dexcom G7 a no-brainer. The Dexcom G7 comes with way more than just this. Up to 10 people can follow you. You can use it with type 1, type 2, or gestational diabetes. It's covered by all sorts of insurances. And this might be the best part. It might be the best part. Alerts and alarms that are customizable so that you can be alerted at the levels that make sense to you. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com to Dexcom and all of the sponsors. When you use my links, you're supporting the production of the podcast and helping to keep it free and plentiful. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Omnipod. And before I tell you about Omnipod, the device, I'd like to tell you about Omnipod, the company. I approached Omnipod in 2015 and asked them to buy an ad on a podcast that I hadn't even begun to make yet. Because the podcast didn't have any listeners, all I could promise them was that I was going to try to help people living with type 1 diabetes. And that was enough for Omnipod. They bought their first ad, and I used that money to support myself while I was growing the Juicebox Podcast. You might even say that Omnipod is the firm foundation of the Juicebox Podcast. And it's actually the firm foundation of how my daughter manages her type 1 diabetes every day. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Whether you want the Omnipod 5 or the Omnipod DASH, using my link lets Omnipod know what a good decision they made in 2015 and continue to make to this day. Omnipod is easy to use, easy to fill, easy to wear. And I know that because my daughter has been wearing one every day since she was 4 years old, and she will be 20 this year. There is not enough time in an ad for me to tell you everything that I know about Omnipod, but please take a look. Omnipod.com/juicebox. I think Omnipod could be a good friend to you, just like it has been to my daughter and my family.
Yeah, there's like the first phase, which is just what you mentioned, and then you can add. They joke that you can add that you got chicken, so you can add like protein. And I never did because I just wanted to jump in. I knew nothing. I had never even heard the word A1C at that point.
Yeah.
So I thought, hey, I've licked this. I'm good. So I stayed on a modified version, and I started losing weight. And I thought, hey, I am good. And I didn't lose, massive amounts. It was very steady. So I thought,
I'm doing this healthy, even.
I am good.
Yeah, right.
That went on for about 5 years. And then the best way to say it is my mental state just collapsed. I couldn't think. I was upset all the time. We own our own business, so I was just under a lot of pressure. I was putting myself under a lot of pressure. I really don't remember what caused me to get up one morning and call my reproductive endocrinologist that I had had 16 years earlier when I was trying to get pregnant with my son. And I said, I need to see an endocrinologist. And I can't tell you what got me to that point. I called them and they said, oh yeah, across the parking lot, go see Dr. So-and-so.
I'm going to guess what got you there is 5 years of rice and apples, but
Yeah. So I called and I couldn't get in. And I just felt at that particular moment, I felt very desperate. So at the time I didn't have insurance. So we have a wonderful nonprofit. It's not the health department, but it's a medical facility. So I called them and they got me in that day, and they did an A1C and it was 17, I think.
Jesus.
It was during COVID, and the lady, you know how things stick in your brain. The lady, the physician's assistant that was helping me, she's Russian. And she's just one of these flappy people, And she had on one of those masks that look like a duck bill. You know what I'm talking about? That people were.
I'm still stuck wondering what flappy means. What is it when people are flappy?
Just a real excitable person,
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
And she had on this mask. So here I am, knowing that my health is just falling apart. And this Russian lady, is just flapping around the room with this, duck bill mask. And I wanted to laugh, but it was just crazy. So anyway, so she's like, you got to get to the emergency room. You got to get to the emergency room. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Shut up. Just calm the hell down, Go to the car. My husband's in the car waiting for me because it's COVID and he can't come in. And I did not know he had called his brother, who is a doctor, and he had not been able to get back in touch with his brother. As I get in the car, my head is just spinning. I'm saying, this lady is saying I got to go to the ER. And he said, I'd really rather talk to my brother before we go, just to see what we're looking at. And I thought that was reasonable. And then my phone rings, and it's the endocrinologist that I had called that morning. And she said, we had a cancellation. We can see you tomorrow.
Did you tell them what had just happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was just the receptionist. And so I told her, and
because
she
at
said,
this point, Polly, you're 5 years late to go to the ER.
Yeah. So,
and you're like, one more day.
One more day. Well, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. And I told her, and she's like, you can go to the ER. And she said, then we'll see you. But she's like, you've gone this far. Why don't you wait till tomorrow afternoon?
I have to be honest, for everyone listening, I don't think that's a reasonable medical response.
I know. It was. She
right.
was just the receptionist.
Yeah.
So I was talking to my husband, and he's like, I really would rather talk to my brother. We can come back into town and go to the ER if he says to go. So he calls us back as soon as we walk in the door. We tell him start to finish. And he said, if this is a reputable endocrinologist and not just, like a general practitioner kind of thing, he's like, I would just go tomorrow and see what happens.
Okay.
So we went tomorrow and the next day. And once again, and I'm going to sound like I'm pooping on physician's assistants. I have not had good experience with physician's assistants.
Okay.
So the physician's assistant at the endocrinologist comes in. Oh, I forgot to. My brother-in-law is he's very thorough.
What kind of doctor is he?
Neurologist.
Okay.
He's very thorough, and he's very kind. He's just the tops in his field.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, you really ought to go get this thing called a GAD test. He said, I doubt you have type 1, but at least, he said, when an A1C is that high, you might have type 1. And he said, that's going to tell you if you do or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So we ran back into town and went to a walk-in, and we did the GAD test. And what's the other one? I forget.
You did the auto antibodies for the GAD and the C-peptide?
C-peptide.
Mm-hmm.
So he told us to do those. We did those. And the next morning we got it, and they faxed it to me. And I looked at the range, and my range was
on the back of the paper. You should have flipped it over to find it. Yeah, I would imagine.
I said, I told my husband, I was like, look at this. I'm not even remotely in the range. And he says, does that mean you have type 1? Because we didn't know.
Sure.
And I was like, it looks like it. And he was like, well, that might explain a lot. So I get to the endocrinologist and I show him these tests. He would not look at them.
Because he wanted to run them and bill you for them.
No, not at all. He wouldn't run them. He goes, if you had type 1, you'd be dead. That's what he told me.
I swear to God, Polly, I got to tell you something. I don't know if I've said this in a while, but the whole thing, it's all being held together by good luck and duct tape. Do you understand?
No kidding.
Yeah. I don't mean you or your health. I mean everything. We're the worst stewards of logic, people. Just like how many people, like that one doctor, I'm 5 years back in this story. That doctor knew what to do, told you to do it. You said no. And she went, okay. What she should have said is, Polly, are you a doctor? Shut up and go to the ER. Right. But instead she goes, Polly wants to try the rice diet. We'll go with are you kidding me? And also you're not a person who goes to the doctor. So you're trying not to go to the doctor to begin with. And she should have pushed back on you. Then no. And then your life falls apart. You end up in another place. Go to the emergency room, then you leave. How about sit here and I'm going to call an ambulance for you? Do you know what I mean? Or go get your husband, or we'll go get your husband who's out in the car or something. Everybody just hopes it's going to be okay. It's fascinating. And then you get to an endocrinologist who tells you, oh, if you had type 1, you'd be dead.
Yeah.
Unless, no. And now, I'm sorry. This is very frustrating. Go ahead. Keep talking. He says that to you.
Imagine my frustration.
Because you got to be out of your mind.
I knew enough. I mean, I can read,
Yeah, now.
So I could read that the ranges were off. And I saw that with my own 2 eyes. And here he is. I'll give him credit where credit is due. He slapped a Libra 2 on me and said, this is going to tell you where you are. And we need to bring the numbers down. And that's what we're going to do. So he slapped a CGM on me, gave me Ozempic, and gave me Jardiance. And I skipped an entire portion of the...
But Polly, how does he ignore the C-peptide and GAD antibody test?
I have no idea.
Because he did everything right if you had type 2 diabetes, but he's looking at testing that says you have type 1.
He wouldn't even look at it. He never looked at it.
I don't understand.
He would not look at it. I know. I mean, we are not litigious people, but we have considered suing him because it was so malpractice.
I don't understand anything that happens. In general, like some of you have great doctors, like you just do. But for those who don't run into great doctors, this is the other side of it.
Yeah.
It's not like a slow gradient from fantastic down to amazing down to either you get a good one or you get this. It seems to be what it is. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You said you missed something in the story. What did you miss?
Yeah. So I failed to say about a year before the Floppy physician's assistant, I went to see a naturopath doctor, and she came very highly recommended. We were back on the type 2 diagnosis, and she had put me on, what's the pill? Oh, God.
Metformin.
What am I thinking of? Metformin.
I'm in your head, Polly. Everything you haven't thought of, I've known today. Go ahead.
I know. There you are.
Go.
And so she had put me on metformin, and I must have had some kind of reaction.
You make a lot of poopy?
It was like nothing I could even imagine, much less had ever happened before. It was terrible.
Okay.
So that's when I went back on the rice diet and all that. So there was that portion there. And she was like, you've got to get to an endocrinologist. And I was like, no, we're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. So here I am diagnosing myself. So anyway, so I'm with this physician's assistant, and he's throwing all these type 2 medications on me. And he was just a terrible person. I mean, I can't say anything nice about him. He had no bedside manner. He wouldn't listen. He would yell at me. It was just my husband. The only time he was nice to me was when he had a trainee physician's assistant there, and she was very cute. And so he was flirting with her, and that was the only time he was nice to me in the 6 months I saw him.
Are you shitting me?
No.
Polly, are you telling me that you only get good medical care when the doctor's showing off for a pretty girl in the room?
Exactly. It was terrible. I don't know what was going on with the MD that was in that practice, because I tried getting in touch with her, telling her, this is what's going on. And they would never let me talk to her. She dealt with the really big cases, I guess. It was.
I don't know. Hold on a second. You're exhausting me. Not you, but this story is exhausting me.
I know.
Oh my God.
It was an interesting.
I'm trying to picture me walking into my doctor's appointment going, I hope there's a young, perky girl in the room so that my doctor tries. Ugh.
I'll tell you the cherry on top of the story with this guy. After your episode about Eversense, I thought, oh, that sounds great. I would like to give it a try.
Mm-hmm.
So I call Eversense, and guess who is the only one who does the implants in my area?
Dr. Feelgood?
Yeah. And the girl and I started just
laughing,
cackling. I started cackling, and I was like, no. So we'll have to try something else.
Polly,
and
I'm going to tell you something, because when this recording comes out, it should be the truth, but they're going to have a 1 year, their sensor's going to go for 1 year soon.
Oh, cool.
Eversense, put it in once. Here's what I understand is coming. 1 insertion a year. And if it all works out, it's only going to require calibration once a week.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's a big leap for that device. So just imagine not having to change your device like 10 days, 14 days, however you're changing yours now. Can't get knocked off, can't fall off in a pool. If you want to stop using it for an hour, you don't have to restart over again with a new device. Like, man, there's a lot of value there. It's coming. You know what I mean? It's pretty awesome. Is it a thing you actually consider?
I was pretty excited about it, because right around the time of that episode, you know how you can go a year without having any issues, and then it's like one thing after. I had to call Libre or Abbott for 6 replacements. And the lady on the phone was like, why are you doing 6 at one time? I was like, I have not had time. It's been one thing after. So I got 6 replacements.
I can't call every time your thing blows up.
I know. And it was just like one thing. I hit it twice, it just didn't work. Another one. So really excited to hear about the Eversense.
Yeah. I think a big part of why people might consider switching to it, I mean, once it goes to the year, and by the way, it should be at a year. By the time this episode comes out, it should already be. Eversense CGM.com/juicebox. Go look if you want to see what it says. But the idea that you won't have to mess with devices, devices, listen, they're all terrific and they add to your life, but then they're almost like buying a pet. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh, I got a thing. It's so cute. I love looking at it, but I also have to clean out its cage and I got to give it water. And so you get a CGM, it's amazing, all the things it brings to you, but now that's also part of your job. So a lot of people are going to see the value in going to a doctor once a year, getting this thing inserted, calibrating it once a week and not thinking about it other than that, I think. But we'll see what happens. So I don't know. Does your story get better? Does anybody realize you have type 1 diabetes at any point in this story?
So I'll just keep going. So
Polly's like, don't knock me off this course.
Yeah, I mean, it eventually gets better. So I'm going to this yo-yo and I just don't feel good about it. And so I'm a Christian and I have learned, obviously, that I don't know everything. And so I prayed about it and I was like, you just got to help me through this, Lord, because I'm not getting anywhere. I learned about LADA and I just felt confident that I was LADA. I remember, and at the time, I have a chronic yeast infection in my intestines. So I was going to another doctor for that, and he was looking at the whole thing. He was trying to just figure out why this yeast infection would not get better. Well, now we know because it was because my
he was 17.
So
yeah.
It was just getting fed constantly with sugar. And so he looked at my GAD and C-peptide, and he said, he says, you sure don't make a lot of insulin. And I was like, thank you. I'm trying to tell, this guy. And he was like, I want to get you on some insulin. He said, I think that's going to help everything. So he put me on Lantus, a real low dose. He was afraid of killing me with Lantus. And again, this is during COVID. So just
not a lot of contact either. Yeah.
I mean, everything was on Zoom and getting into other doctors was difficult. And he says, I feel confident that this is going to help you. So I am sitting in front of the grocery store after picking up my Lantus and my phone rings and it's the endocrinologist's office. And the girl said, I've got some bad news. The PA just left the practice and you have an appointment next week and we don't have anybody for you to see. I started cackling I'm sure she thought I was just the craziest person in the world. And I started cackling and it was like, I believe in prayer. I said, I got my answer because I am not supposed to see him. So she was like, we just don't know what we're going to do. So when we get somebody else, we'll call you and set up an appointment. That was December. And I probably went 5 months without seeing anybody, which was just fine. I mean, because I wasn't getting good care to begin with.
Right.
I went back to the health department place and they were like, you need to be seen. And so they did a referral to a big hospital in Reno, which is the next big town. Got in there to see the doctor and he immediately looked at the GAD and the C-peptide and he goes, you're LADA. He said, why are you being treated for type 2? And I was like, well, thank you. That's been my question for the last year and a half.
Wow. It's 18 months since you went to that endocrinologist and said, look at this test. And he said, no, I'm not going to look at it. You'd be dead.
Yeah.
I don't.
And it took a doctor, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
He kept me on Ozempic. He took me off of the Jardiance.
Was the Ozempic helping you? Did you lose weight?
I was losing weight. I would say overall, it definitely helped.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it must have been helping a little bit with the resistance as well, I would imagine. Your limited beta cells you're probably getting more bang for your buck than you would without it.
Exactly. I think that's what it was.
All right.
He was not convinced that it was helping. And at that time, I didn't need to lose any more weight. I was pretty thin at that time.
Okay.
But he thought it would help with the gut issues because it was giving me some consistency on digestion.
Okay.
So like right now, I'm not on the Ozempic, and my digestion is one meal, it might digest in 20 minutes, and another, it might be 3 hours. It's very inconsistent. So that's very frustrating.
I don't have diabetes, and I love GLP for how consistent it makes your digestion. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me.
He kept me on that. I saw him in September 3 years ago. I was pretty good. My A1C, I think I was like around 6.2. He was pleased. So I was still just doing the very low dose of Lantus and the Ozempic. And so I was just kind of rocking along with that. And then Christmas came and went. And between Christmas and New Year's, I could not bring my numbers down. I was constantly at 200, 250. I called them and they said, "Nope, you're over your honeymoon." They put me on a pen, and I started taking that.
Here comes the next part.
Yeah.
Wow, what a slow. It's so, I mean, obviously we'll never know, but how interesting would it be to go back to the beginning, go to that emergency room on day one, get that testing, find out you have LADA, and I wonder how well it would have got managed if they knew exactly what it was and how long it might have strung this out. Because the reason you're not dead is because your onset was so slow.
It was so slow. And my brother-in-law pontificates that it's because we were on a vegan diet. And so I was very consistent with what I was eating.
Were you lower carb?
No, it was actually high carb.
High carb.
It was a very high carb diet.
That high carb, high fat thing?
Low fat.
Low fat, excuse me, like the mastering diabetes thing? Or no?
Yeah, probably a lot like them.
Okay.
I'll be honest. I looked into mastering diabetes. For whatever reason, it just didn't click with me. And maybe it was because I was doing this other diet for so long. Just the high fruit just really would send me flying.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So it just didn't sit well with me, even after the rice diet. But the high fruit of mastering diabetes just didn't make sense to me.
Okay.
After I got the CGM, I could see, where it would just send me flying. But I know a lot of people do well on it, but it just didn't click with me.
With a lot of those different plans, if you stick to them, they often give you what they say they're going to. And I think where the hiccup is when people can't stick to them. So
yeah, exactly.
Or don't want to or whatever. How do you find me?
So I did what any 21st century person did, and I got on Facebook and I looked up LADA. I found 2 LADA groups, and one of them was just hardcore low carb, which I just haven't even looked into that. It's just not, it wouldn't fit my life.
I'd love to see you jump in there and tell them about your rice diet. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, their heads would blow off. And then another one, not hardcore, but they definitely leaned towards the low carb. And they would talk about Juicebox Podcast, Juicebox Facebook group, And I'm like, what in the hell is this Juicebox? And I really ignored it because I mean, no offense. I mean, absolutely no offense, because I love the podcast and I love the Facebook group. But I just thought, what a stupid name. I'm not going to go look at Juicebox. That must be for kids. And then one day I was like, okay, I got to find out what this Juicebox, because they were just talking about one of the episodes. I went to the Facebook group and just fell in love with it because everybody is just so helpful. And
it's a kind place.
It is very kind.
Yeah. Very
nice people. I kind of left that LADA group behind and went to the Facebook group. And I probably stayed on the Facebook group for a good 3 months before I ever listened to an episode. It was a little bit overwhelming because there's just so much information. So I went to the website and I saw where you had, different groups of episodes, and that was helpful.
I'm glad. That's Isabel. She did that for me.
She did a fabulous job.
Because I'm a boy.
And that was very...
She met me and she goes, you need to be more organized. And I was like, well, that's not going to happen if you're waiting for me to do it. So
yeah,
if you'd like to get involved, that'd be wonderful. I get stuck in that spot. I don't know what to do. I create content. You know what I mean? So if you make an episode once a week or once a month or something, it's not enough. You don't cover enough details and you don't cover enough subjects. And if you put it out as fast as it needs to be put out so that you can get it all out there, then some people say, oh my God, I feel overwhelmed. And you're like, I can't win. So I throw it all out there and I just hope you can find it and then try to give you some opportunities to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an imperfect system, but it sounds like you made your way through it about the way we expect, by the way.
Yeah.
Get on Facebook, hear a bunch of people saying Juicebox Podcast. You're like, what the hell is that? I'll go look. Actually, the way I market the podcast is the way I got my wife to marry me. I was just like, I just put her in a situation where she's like, oh my God, if you're going to keep asking, then okay. You hear Juicebox, you head over, you find the Facebook group, and then it's unavoidable. If you're in that group at any interval, you are going to see 3 people a day say, this podcast really saved me. And then I guess it's got to draw you in at some point, right? Yeah,
I mean, it's just the truth. I'm not a deep thinker. I'm more of my husband. I leave that to my husband and my children. They all have that engineering brain type thing going on. And I'm the one who just kind of fills in the gaps. So I was listening to the podcast and it was making so much sense to me. My husband and I got in the car and I was like, you got to listen to this and tell me if, I'm understanding this correctly. If you understand it the same way I did.
Are you hearing what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we did. And he probably like 3 or 4 of the bold beginnings that day we were in the car. And he was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. He was like, I would have never thought of it, but it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it really changed, not drastically, but it changed and kind of put us on a path of management that I think has been very helpful.
Oh, I'm glad. That's excellent.
The digestion thing is, the monkey wrench and everything. Dealing with that is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't pre-bolus like other people can. I'm constantly playing catch up because I just don't know when the food is going to hit. So one would say, well, that such and such is going to hit you quickly. And that's not true. There's just no...
Are you on the GLP right now?
No, I'm not.
Is there a reason why?
My husband was having some endocrine issues. So he went to an endocrinologist and another one. He got recommended to another one and we just really liked him. So I started going to him as well. And the endocrinologist is great, but his PA is not. The PA took me off of the Ozempic and wouldn't increase my basal, just really made a lot of bad choices.
I mean, if you take somebody off a GLP, they're going to need more insulin, very likely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So now that I'm off of it, the insurance won't pay for it. My doctor did a conference call with the insurance company. They still won't do it. So we're going to try again in 6 months.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
The getting off it is horrible because once you've got the okay, you don't want to make them look over at you again. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. And
yeah.
now
I've learned that.
You got it when you had a type 2 diagnosis.
Exactly.
Right. So now they're going to have to go back and give you a dual diagnosis of type 1 and insulin resistance, and they're going to have to call that type 2, and then the insurance company is going to have to accept that there's a dual diagnosis, which is starting to happen, but you're not for sure that it's going to happen. And you're going to need somebody really thoughtful to have those conversations with them. And that doctor's going to have to be invested in following through, or you're not going to get anywhere.
And he's not right now.
Right.
Because he's not 100% sure that that's the direction we need to go.
Yeah. Have you explained the value behind the digestion and what it was doing for you?
Yes and no. I don't think it has clicked with him. He's just grateful. The yeast infection has gotten, compared to where I was even 6 months ago, it is night and day.
Yeah, but that's apples and oranges. Those two things I see why he thought they were connected originally, but they're not.
We've talked about it, and he's just not. There's so much going on. I've got the Hashimoto's and the yeast infection and...
Oh, you have Hashimoto's? Where's your TSH?
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
The last time I had it done, he apparently was very good because he messaged me saying, this is amazing. We're making progress. And so it was good.
Keep pushing until you get under 2 if you can.
Now that you mentioned a number, I think it was 4.
Yeah, keep pushing it under 2. You'll see a reduction in symptoms, I would imagine, if you can get it under 2. What symptoms of Hashimoto's do you currently have?
Well, lately, I really have, other than being tired and, the typical stuff, lately I've been having my throat kind of close up, which is not making me happy.
No.
That's a new thing, like within the last 5 or 6 weeks.
What's your dose? Do you know? Is it 0.88?
No, I want to say 0.25.
Oh,
it's pretty low.
Yeah, it should probably be. I mean, this is a good time for me to say, Polly, I'm not a doctor and I barely got through high school, but I would think that given, like, I saw you for a split second when we first started talking, and I don't know your weight, or I'm not guessing it, but I don't see how 0.25, if 0.25 is keeping you in the 4s, that seems like a low amount. I would think you could handle more.
From hearing other people talk on the podcast and on the Facebook group, I thought it was low.
Yeah, there's a lot of things they could do. They could even just giving you one extra pill, like a month sometimes. You'd be surprised how good doctors like work through it. But just push for under 2 and that'll help. But that's, and it could help your digestion a little. I mean, your thyroid does help with digestion.
Yeah.
So it's not crazy to think that you could get some benefit from that. And if he wants to go the route of no GLP, I want to handle it through getting your TSH right, well, then that's fine. But then adjust my TSH.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't take me off a GLP and then don't adjust my insulin. That's insane.
We are, obviously watching the insulin, but I mostly take Afrezza so I can get on it quickly when it does start going up, because since I can't pre-bolus.
Oh, that's cool.
And I can't do a pump. So it's been very, very helpful up until my last A1C, which was about 6 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was 5.4.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So between the Afrezza, and I am a big fan of the Sugar Pixel on my desk, I know where I stand. And so I can jump on it pretty quickly when the food does start digesting.
Yeah.
So that's been really nice. And so my new PA that took me off the Ozempic, he left the practice. So once again, I've gotten rid of another PA. You'll like this, another PA story. So I am prone to UTIs, and I knew I had a UTI, and nobody would do the flipping test, to tell me I had one. One day I knew I just had this raging UTI, and I was at 280, and it took 22 units to bring me down to 150. And I have never taken that much insulin in my life.
That's the infection, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So coincidentally, the hospital called to do an appointment for a test. I was so upset over this high blood sugar that would not move, and all this insulin I was taking. I was sure I was killing myself, So this poor girl in the scheduling office, Dr. So-and-so could care less if I was laying flat on the floor. And I told her what was going on. She was like, well, that's just not right. And I was like, well, I can tell you it's not right, but that's where my life is right now. And she was like, well, we're going to fix that. And I mean, God bless her. I would say 20 minutes later, I get a call from the doctor, the MD. And he said, what's going on? And I told him, he's like, well, there's a lot going on there. He was like, you should be on more than 8 units of basal. He was like, that's just not doing any good. And so he said, we got to fix this basal. And he said, we got to fix this UTI. And I was like, well, yeah, thank you. I would say that was kind of a turning point. That was probably about 4 months ago. And so we got the basal worked out, and we got the UTI worked out. So I've been flying high since
You're getting better. Yeah. I mean, it's moving along. It's just so slow for you. Like, it shouldn't take this long to get these things straight.
It shouldn't.
It's just, I mean, do you have a feeling after having been through all this, like, I know you said you're not the engineering thinker in your family, but what could have happened to you? I don't usually ask ham-fisted questions like this, but along the way, I mean, you must have been thinking about this forever. Like along the way, what would have helped you? Like what would people need to have done in certain situations that would have been really valuable for you?
The gut issues, like I said, just throw a monkey wrench into everything because number one, it just makes me feel so bad. And then add high blood sugars and all that to it. I really don't know, honestly, because we're trained to trust doctors, to trust the medical establishment. I've just gotten such bad advice.
Yeah. So where have they let you down? Like looking back now, like, are there moments where you're like, I was told this or have we gone over all of them? Or I'm just trying to figure out if I'm a doctor and I'm listening to this, like, it's going to be easy to hear this and go, oh, this is the problem. We're all fractured. There's one doctor does this and one does that. And you've got to get references and referrals and insurance and not everybody knows what's happening. And like, I get all the arguments, but what fixes that for you?
Yeah.
You don't know.
I guess just, I got to go back to my brother-in-law, him thinking out of the box, what neurologist thinks about, type 1.
It shouldn't be out of the box thinking. It's an out of the box thinking for a neurologist, but not for an endo. Your endo was like literally 100% wrong when you face them with those tests.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I really can't say, I guess just it's shocking the number of people on, your podcast that are misdiagnosed. It's the norm.
It's funny because can I say, Polly, that people like I'll hear from doctors, like you have a lot of episodes where people are being negative about their doctors. And I want to say to them, like, do you think this was my goal? Like, do you think I started up a podcast and I thought to myself, like, I'll have a lot of conversations about how doctors let people down? I never thought that. Mine, oddly enough, my doctors were, for Arden were okay. Like they weren't great, but I was masking so much of it. I didn't know if they were good or bad to begin with. Like I wouldn't have known. But if you would have come from my personal experience, I would have been like, oh, the doctors are fine. It's not till I start talking to like these are the people who are reaching out. You know what I mean? Like, and other people who have good doctors hear these episodes and sometimes they reach out. But if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, this podcast has a lot of conversations about how doctors are, not doing a good job. Like this podcast is a problem. Like I'm not the problem. People are just coming on and telling their story. I didn't know what the hell Polly was going to say before she got here today. Like seriously, like do a better job. Like, I don't know what you want from me as a whole, like, as a profession.
The only thing I can think of, there's just such a prevalence of type 2 that's just top of mind. I think you were too. I was in advertising for a while, and you talk about top of mind awareness. And I think that just type 2 is what everybody's thinking about. Type 1 is, and definitely LADA is, just so way back in everyone's mind that it just falls by the wayside. That shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Bodies break down. So, type 1 is going to.
I mean, it's not like there's a million possibilities for what was wrong with you. You had type 1 or type 2 diabetes. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they had.
We only had two choices.
There were two choices. Like, why don't we go crazy and pay attention to both of them? I don't know. Like, it seems so ridiculous that they can't. And listen, I've also had conversations with doctors that at the end of them, they sway me. And I'm like, all right, well, I see how this happens. And, I could probably talk to your doctors and they might say stuff like, I don't know, Polly's non-committal. She's, I said something and she went with me or like whatever, like she didn't fight me. So I thought she didn't. I don't know what they would say, but I'm frustrated by this conversation over and over again. And I think it's possible people think I'm frustrated about diabetes. I'm frustrated about people. Like that's my concern. Like you think this is about diabetes? It's not. This is about everything. And the example people use all the time, like, 15 years ago, people used to love to say like, these computers are ruining everything. I went to a cash register and my cashier didn't know what my change was. And people would use that as an example of like society not being able to make decisions about stuff or understanding things well enough to even do their own jobs. But I do think that as automated as everything is getting, it's good. I do think it's good. But at the same time, we're not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're not there yet. And we still need people to think. And I think a lot of people have given up on the thinking part. They're like, oh, the process takes care of it. Or someone in another department does that. I had a conversation this morning. It's nothing again. Like, it's not a big thing. I was talking to an advertiser and they were like, oh yeah, we got to get that set up. I have to move that to this person. And I'm like, you don't know how to do that part? Like, wow, like this is segmented. You know what I mean? Like you hear about siloing, you know what I mean? That's a professional term, right? But they say that the reason these organizations are so, like organizations in general are so inept is because everyone's siloed, meaning that they're stuck in this one knowledge spot within the company. They know how to do one thing. And if you ask them to think about the silo next to them, not only can they not think about it, they don't even know what's in that silo. They just know that when I hear that word, Bill gets the email. That's it. Like nobody understands anything. And now, okay, if it's in advertising, but when it's a physician, like, Jesus, that's frightening. I was watching something. I don't remember what the hell it was. And the host was talking. This is not a show that usually talks about medicine. And the host started talking about, if you think your doctor knows best, you better be careful. Check for yourself. And then he used the word. And then he goes, you're going to have to be your own best advocate. And I was like, oh, now wait, that got outside of conversations around like health stuff. Like now other people are aware of this. So it's into the mainstream now. Like you think I'm talking about it. Wait till the mainstream who doesn't have any compassion for how hard it is to be a doctor or how difficult it is to figure things out. Like wait till they get a hold of the fact that people are going to you and getting misdiagnosed for 5 years. Then you're going to run back to me and say, oh, Scott was nice. So I don't know, Polly. I'm pissed. The whole thing I've been frustrated by it for years, you know, so it's hard for me to talk about without getting upset sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I just think it's more manageable now. And I hate it. You know, I was just telling my husband, we went to some kind of meeting a couple of weeks ago and they were serving these fruit nectar juices and they're really tasty. And, you know, I used to drink them when I was a kid. And I said, you know, I can't even think about drinking something like that because it would just send me sky high. And I said, you know, I have to think about that. I can't just have a juice, you know, like a normal person.
Hey, you're not looking to drink a gallon of juice a day, but like you're at a thing and there's a cup of something there and you feel reminiscent about it. You'd like to be able to take a couple of sips. Yeah.
And, you know, I said, I have to think about, you know, juice, you know, who thinks about juice? And I've never been a juice drinker, but, you know, if I wanted it, I would like to be able to drink it, but I can't. And so that kind of stuff is frustrating.
Listen, my daughter has diabetes and we were away somewhere and someone had lemonade. I love lemonade, right? But this was like full on sugar made from lemons lemonade. And I got a glass of it and I got about halfway through it and I thought, oh, I should stop drinking this.
Yeah. My husband's the same way.
Yeah. So I just put it down.
He loves like that lemonade slushy stuff and he'll drink, you know, maybe 2 sips of it. And he's like, my eyes are fuzzy because of the sugar, you know?
We all live like, well, not everybody, but like I limit sugar pretty significantly for me. Yeah. And yeah, you have a little bit and you're like, oh my God, is this what cocaine's like? Meanwhile, people who have done cocaine are like, no, but,
we're all cheap drunks.
But yeah, exactly. I would be a very, very cheap date for sure. I'd be like, I'd have a half a beer and I'd be buzzing around. So
yeah.
Anyway, but I take your point. Like, it's just, it sucks. It's not something you want to be doing. Just because you're doing well at it doesn't mean it's fun. That's for sure.
Yeah. You know, when you add all of it, the Hashimoto's and the diabetes and the gut thing. And I know you're a big advocate for GLPs right now. And I do see now that I'm off of it, I can see that there's a lot less consistency because which is interesting. You know, I don't know enough about it. You've probably studied it a lot more than I have, but it just seems to be a lot less consistent right now than...
Study is a strong word, Polly, but I am trying to pay attention to it because I really believe after what I saw with Arden, I'm like, man, this is really something. Like, there's a lot here to be learned. You know, Arden was at the lowest dose of Mounjaro. 2.25. What is the lowest dose of Mounjaro? Hold on a second. I should probably also learn how to pronounce it at some point, but I honestly don't care. Mounjaro, is that it? 2.5 milligrams, right? Is the starting lowest dose. That's all Arden was using, 2.5 a week. But she got to the point where we were like, you look too thin. So how do you balance all the value you're getting? Insulin use, insulin sensitivity, her acne cleared up, like all this stuff, right? Like there's a lot going on here that is clear about, to me, is clear it's impacting insulin resistance. And, probably a 20% reduction in her insulin use. But she's like that. I'm like, I'm never hungry. And so she's making herself eat. And, she's like, I'd like to be hungry once in a while. I'm like, yeah, right on. Like, I'm not looking for you to lose. She lost some weight, which was fine, but then she lost some more. And we were like, and she got to the point where we were like, you got to put 7 pounds on here. And so we got the weight back on her, which wasn't hard, but we did it by taking her just off the Mounjaro for a week or two, well, for a month. And she put the weight back on. But Jesus, her insulin needs went crazy again. And I was like, all right. So now we're dosing it. By the way, sometimes I say stuff on here and I'm like, I don't know if I should be saying this or not, but I'm not a doctor. This isn't advice. You shouldn't be doing this, et cetera, and so on. Use drugs the way they're meant to be used. We're injecting the pen into a new clean vial and then drawing it out with an insulin needle. And we started by giving her half of it. So if she was 2.5, it's 1.25. And that wasn't enough. But that was basically about 15 units in an insulin pen. So this week I texted her and I said, hey, when you inject the Mounjaro this week, do 18 units. We're going to move up slowly because we're trying to find the balance between impact on her insulin, stability for her digestion and for her blood sugars, and still being able to eat. And we're very hopeful we're going to find it. I see the difference this week. And I think next week we'll move up a little more and then find that balance between being able to eat and getting the good impacts for the rest of the stuff. So my expectation is once it gets wider used by type 1s, they're going to have to put it into a vial and then let you talk to your doctor about dosing instead of just saying because these are all set up for, here's your starter dose, here's your move up, your move up, your move up. And we got to get you up to this big dose in order for it to really work for you if you're really trying to lose a lot of weight and everything. But what if you're not trying to lose a lot of weight? There's still a ton of value here. Anyway, I just went on for a while, but that's what I think about it at the moment.
It didn't affect my appetite. It didn't completely take my appetite away. But at 4:00, it was as if a switch was turned off. And the thought of food was the last thing on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so from 4 to 10 o'clock the next morning, I would not want to eat. It was the craziest thing.
Oh, it hit you times a day. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Today is my injection day, and I don't have I have to go to the pharmacy today to pick it up, right? And I woke up this morning and I was standing in here like planning my day out, and I was like, man, am I hungry? I haven't felt hungry like this. And I was like, oh, in about a week. It's really crazy how it hits different people different ways.
The injection day, yes, I would be hungry on the injection day.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Well,
but which makes sense.
Yeah, I know more and more people, they're calling it microdosing, but they're basically finding their own dose of it, and it's going to get popular. People are going to have success with it and start talking about it, and then it's going to make its way out. I know some people are shooting tiny bits of it every day. Some people are doing what we're doing with Arden, which is once a week, but less. It's going to find its footing. And then,
I tried the smaller amounts 2 or 3 times a week, and it didn't make a huge difference.
Not enough of an impact. Yeah.
It wasn't worth the effort.
Well, for Arden's like, I'm not injecting every day, just so you know. And I was like, okay. She's like, that's just not happening. So I was like, gotcha. So that's why we're trying to find a balance here. And I don't know. All I can tell you is it's not for everybody. Or some people are going to have side effects that they're just going to be like, this isn't worth it to me, or that they just can't do it. But you're going to hear about more and more people who are finding value with it too. So we'll see what happens. What else? Anything else? Are we good?
I think that's enough.
We've done it?
Yeah.
Polly, I love that attitude. I think that's enough. I like how earlier you said I'm Christian, so I know I don't know everything. And I thought I'm not Christian. I know too. How did she find out? It's like, can I ask one question though before we go?
Sure.
If your family's brains work in like an engineering way, how do you describe how yours works?
All over the place. Just, I see everything, not details. I'm not a detail person.
Big picture? You see big picture stuff?
Definitely big picture. Yeah.
You know how things impacted something else, but you don't, like, you see that it impacts it. You know for sure it does, but you're not sure the mechanism. It just does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Artistic? Are you artistic?
I'm not particularly, I've been told I have artistic brain, but I'm not an artistic person. Like, I like to cook and
make things.
Not really,
Not
but
really.
I mean, cooking's probably my thing. Cooking's probably my outlet, you know.
Polly, you have no ego when you're talking about yourself. It's very nice.
Well, I don't. It doesn't do any good.
You're just like, I don't know anything about that. Some people would be like, oh no, you know what? No, not really. It's excellent.
No.
How many kids do you have?
2.
Do they have any autoimmune issues?
I think my daughter does. We had her thyroid tested because she was just sick. Right after she started college 2 years ago, she was just exhausted. And so that was my first thought. But it came back, not even close to a problem. My son, we did the type 1 test for him, and he came back clear.
Okay. Does your daughter have any of your digestion issues?
No.
Okay.
No. My endocrinologist is pretty convinced this was an acquired thing and then the high blood sugars fed it, that somehow I got this yeast infection and then the sugar just fed it for so long.
I meant more about the speed of your digestion, because is it possible she's not picking up nutrients maybe?
We had that thought, but I think she had just run herself down. Both my kids were homeschooled, and we did a dual enrollment program at a community college. And so she was pretty young, and she was taking college classes, and she got involved in student government and all of that. I think she was just running herself ragged.
Burned the candle at both ends, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Gotcha.
So she's doing much better as far as energy and all that. So I don't think my gut tells me it's not a health issue.
So our daughters are the same age then. Arden's 20.
Mine just turned 18.
18. Oh, but she's in college 2 years?
Yep. She started when she was 15
the
and a half.
thing that I didn't account for. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and adding your voice to the podcast. It's been fantastic getting to know you. I really do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for all you do.
Oh, that's nice. You're welcome. Would this go the way you expected?
Yeah.
Good.
Pretty much. You're good at what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, I know I am. I tried to sound humble. It didn't work. I'm just teasing. Now I'm just being funny, and now people are like, he's not being funny. I know I'm pretty good at this, but I've gotten a lot better at it over time, which makes me think there's another ceiling that I'm just not aware of. So I'm trying to keep going and getting better at it. So we'll see. I'm doing my best here. So I appreciate you very much. Hold on 1 second for me.
Okay.
A huge thanks to Omnipod. Not just my longest sponsor, but my first one. Omnipod.com/juicebox. If you love the podcast and you love tubeless insulin pumps, this link is for you. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Dexcom sponsored this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Learn more about the Dexcom G7 at my link, dexcom.com/juicebox. Earlier, you heard me talking about Blue Circle Health, the free virtual type 1 diabetes care, education, and support program for adults. And I know it sounds too good to be true, but I swear it's real. Thanks to funding from a big T1D philanthropy group, Blue Circle Health doesn't bill your insurance or charge you a cent. In other words, it's free. They can help you with things like carb counting, insurance navigation, diabetes technology, insulin adjustments, peer support, prescription assistance, and much more. So if you're tired of waiting 9 months to get in with your endo or your educator, you can get an appointment with their team within 1 to 2 weeks. This program is showing what T1D care can and should look like. Blue Circle Health is currently available in Florida, Maine, Vermont, Ohio, Delaware, Alabama, and Missouri. If you live in one of those states, go to bluecirclehealth.org to sign up today. The link is in the show notes. And please help me to spread the word. Blue Circle Health had to buy an ad because people don't believe that it's free. But it is. They're trying to give you free care. If you live in Florida, Maine, Vermont, Ohio, Delaware, Alabama, and Missouri, it's ready to go right now. And like I said, they're adding states so quickly in 2025 that you want to follow them on social media at Blue Circle Health. And you can also keep checking bluecirclehealth.org to see when your free care is available to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following the podcast in your favorite audio app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do that now. Seriously, just to hit follow or subscribe will really help the show. If you go a little further in Apple Podcasts and set it up so that it downloads all new episodes, I'll be your best friend. And if you leave a 5-star review, I'll probably send you a Christmas card. Would you like a Christmas card? The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.